Welcome back, guys. HSC Mortar Platoon 2327 No Slack, back with How to Mortar 101 Virtual Class Series. Today we will be going into the introduction to Fire Direction Center of Procedures. The instructor will be myself, Staff Sergeant Corey Peters. If you have any questions or want to reference anything, you can look in TC 3-22.91. So the first thing that we're going to go over are the basic types of missions that FDC receives. So the first one is Mark Center Sector. So if we are firing this mission, example would be Mortar, be the first one that we fire. So the FOs and FDC will get together and they will figure out the grid to the middle of the safety fan, and then we'll fire that mission. Just observe that each round from each gun is observed safe. The next mission would be the registration, used to resolve interior and exterior ballistics and errors. So this process is just similar to zeroing a rifle. Just note that when we do register, we are trying to perfect our sheath. So at this point, if you think back to any of the training mission or training problems that we've done, you'll get your reefer realignment. So each gun will have a different deflection during this time to perfect that sheath once again. The next one we have is grid. So it's used when the enemy is at a known location. So at that point, FDC is receiving a 6 or 8 digit grid to compute that mission. The fourth one is shift, which is used to shift from a known point. It could be shifted from a registration point, a target number, and then it's giving the distance direction from that known point. The fifth one we have is polar, which is used to express target's location using the target's direction distance from the observer's location. Just note, before calling for polar, observer's location must be known at this time, and those missions can be used at any point whenever a friendly element's calling for fire. They'll signify which mission they want for those. The sixth one would be the immediate smoke or suppression, which is used to deliver fires as quickly as possible. And then the seventh one, the last one for the basic fire missions, would be the illumination, which is used to illuminate the battlefield for our friendly forces. So for each of these missions, this is what you'll need. The Mark Center Sector, you will need your grid, the grid to the middle of the safety fan. The registration, you'll need your location, and then the grid that the FO gives you. The FO will adjust you again with the registration to get that sheath perfected. For the grid, you'll need your location, the OT direction, the altitude, and then the target location. Shift, you'll need your location, the known point location, the observer grid, the OT direction, altitude, the left or right, add or drop, vertical shift, up or down. For the polar, you'll need your location, the observer grid, OT direction, altitude, distance, the vertical interval up or down, and then the vertical interval plus or minus. And then for the immediate smoke or suppression, you'll need your location, the target location, and then speed. You want to get these rounds downrange as fast as possible. And then lastly, we have illumination. You'll need your location, the target location, and then the time setting. Now we have a few examples for each one. So if you look off to the left here, we have the grid computer record. So just note, for all these missions, they have their own signified box. And then for those boxes, they'll have certain things that will need to be filled out. So if you look at the shift from known point, you'll see that it's located in the middle of the computer record. And then for the polar mission, it's located on the far right of the computer record. So now we'll move on to the advanced fire missions. So the first one that we have is coordinated illume, which is used to combine the illume with HE, red phos, or Willie P to illuminate and engage the target. So an example would be friendly forces are moving, doing a night op, and they cannot see the enemy. So at this point, they would use illume and then adjust on to the target itself using HE, red phos, or white phos. Next, we'll have the FPF, which is used as a defensive measure to prevent friendly units from being overrun by the enemy. So with this, just know that squad leaders will usually be issued the priority target number for this. It'll be given a name, and then for that, FDC will compute the deflection, charge, and elevation and give that to the squad leaders. At any point, the FPF can be called upon, and once that happens, just make sure that the gun line is getting the guns up as fast as possible. The next one we have is the search, which is used to fire upon targets that are deeper or vertical than the bursting diameter. Traverse, which is used to fire upon targets that are wider than the bursting diameter. Search and traverse is just a combination of the two, both 3 and 4. 6, we have quick smoke, which is used to obscure or screen the enemy, signaling and marking, and then also deception, which is just confusing the enemy. The 7th one, which would be simultaneous, which is used to fire upon 2 targets from a single location. So at this point, FDC receives one mission, they are computing that mission, and then during that mission, another friendly element calls for fire. So at that point, FDC will have to compute 2 missions to fire. The next one, split section, which is used to fire upon a single target from more than one location. So at this point, we'd have section alpha at one location, section bravo at another, and then both sections firing upon the same target. And then lastly, we have time on target, which is used to shoot the rounds at a specific time. So for each of the missions, this is what you'll need. For the coordinated illume, you'll need your location, the target location, the data for the illume rounds, also the HE rounds, the time setting for the illume round, so what you're putting on the round for the time setting, the time needed between the rounds. So to find the time needed in between those rounds, you'll have to find the difference using the mark time for the illume and then subtracting the mark time from the time of flight of the HE. So example, the mark time for the illume is 52 seconds, and then the time of flight for the HE is 43 seconds, and then subtract the two, the difference is 9 seconds. So that's going to be the time in between those rounds. And then for the final protective fire, you'll need your location, the grid to the FPF, the OT direction, length, width, and attitude of the FPF, and then also the FO will determine the danger close gun. So the gun closest, and then allot rounds to each gun for the FPF. And then for 3 and 4, search and traverse, you can just kind of look at number 5. The only difference between the two is just checking a box inside the LHMBC itself. So for search and traverse, you'll need your location, the target location, the orientation method, the adjusting point location, the target length, width, attitude, amount of turns up or down, and then the amount of turns left or right. So important thing here, when conducting a search and traverse mission, you will need to ensure that 1, you know exactly which direction to turn the traversing or elevation knob for the direction. And then secondly would be once FDC issues the gun data, ensuring that the gun is set up opposite traversing left or right, and then also elevation up or down. This will then allow you to complete the mission without running out of traverse or elevation. So just know if you do start in center traverse and you have 2 turns in between rounds, and if you do not stop or start on the opposite side, you're going to run out of traverse, and at that point the rounds are going to hit in the wrong location. And then continued, what you'll need. So for quick smoke, you'll need your location, the target location, OT direction, length, width, attitude, amount of rounds needed, and both the establishment phase and then also the maintenance phase. The wind speed and the wind direction. For the simultaneous or SIMO mission, you'll need your location, both target locations, the type of mission. Again, simultaneous is just firing upon 2 targets from a single location. Split section, again, going back to section alpha and section bravo, you'll need both of those locations, the target location, the type of mission for that split section, and then again, the split section is just firing upon a single target from more than one location. And then lastly, we have time on target, which is your location, target location, and then the time desired to fire that fire mission. So just note, for the observer, he must conduct a time check to ensure that his timepiece is synchronized to FDC's timepiece. So at this point, we're going to move into occupied at the MFP. So we're going to get into what the personnel is doing at this point when we're occupied. So the FDC chief, he will begin setting up the plotting board, superimposing all of the base plate grids, priority targets, no fire areas, restricted fire areas, etc. on the M16 or the plotting board. Later on through the presentation, I will go over more of what that looks like on the plotting board itself. And then he'll also prep the computer records and data sheets. Again, we're going to have examples of this later on in the presentation. And then ensuring that the data in the LHMBC matches the FDC checks. He will construct the safety T diagram and then issue it out to the squad leaders once it's complete. And then he'll routinely check for new metadata. This is a huge thing, especially in a deployed environment. when it's very mountainous because the weather changes drastically. And so with that met, it's going to need to be input as frequently as possible. The FDC check will plot all the friendly frontline traces, which just allows FDC to know ahead of time if it's going to be danger close to the element. He will also plot the priority targets, so the no fire areas, restricted fire areas on the map. He will request delay on priority targets from fires, so once we get MFP established, we can then go ahead and have the gun set up on that priority target. He will then allot the rounds to the FPFs and then set those aside. Again, those rounds will only be touched once the FPF is called. Hopefully it will never be called upon. And then also, he will double check the round count at each gun position, ensuring that we have an accurate round count at all times. The RTO will maintain comms, double check the round counts. Again, accuracy is the key with the rounds. And then he will troubleshoot issues with comms. So note, once all the guns have been laid in with the M2 Alpha 2 or the aiming circle and poles laid, we will then be MFP established, standing by for fire missions. So at this point, we can receive a fire mission. So at this point, FDC will copy the following transmission from fires. So the type of mission, whether it be a just fire, fire for effect, immediate suppression, etc. The target grid location, the OT direction, and then also the altitude. Just note that if the FO gives you the target number, he won't give you the grid location. You'll just have to refer to the target list worksheet for that. The target description, and then the method of engagement. So the target description would be, we have a squad size enemy element in the open. We want to engage with 10 rounds HE, fire for effect. This information will then be copied onto the computer record and then relayed back to fires and ensure we have a good copy. Once we do have that good copy from fires, we will then, or FDC will then, go ahead and compute the mission on the LHMBC and then ensure that both computers are matching. The FDC chief or check, whoever is monitoring the radio, will issue the message to observer. This will usually just entail the target number, how many systems will be firing that mission, and then how many total rounds will be fired once the mission is complete. And then also, if angle T is in effect, he will then go ahead and issue that in the message to observer as well. So the message to observer can be issued after we have received the call for fire or just before shooting the mission. FDC check will then, once we get clearance to fire the mission, he will either shout or call over the radio the gun commands to the gun line, and then at that point the gun line will get the gun up and then shoot the mission. So once we fire the mission, we'll get an end mission. At this point, we have received the battle damage assessment from fires, which examples would include end of mission, target destroyed, end of mission, 5 enemy KIA, so on and so forth. And then also FDC will notify the gun line of the end of mission. Whoever again is monitoring the radio will send up the BDA to higher, and then FDC will update the data sheets and computer records of that mission. So additional information, if FDC receives a repeat from fires, FDC will then announce the last elevation to the gun line, signifying repeat last mission. So if the gun line fired 10 rounds in the fire for effect, the FDC comes back with the same elevation. The gun line will then fire the same amount of rounds in that mission, and also the same fuse setting. So here are some reasons why the squads stand by at the gun line for so long. The FO has not reported location in correlation to the target grid. We don't want to fire on any friendly troops, so we have to wait on that to compute that mission. The frontline trace is too close to fire the mission. At that point, they'll have to adjust as needed. The FO is unsure of location. The FO sends wrong gun needed. The example would be the range too far for the 81. At that point, FDC will have to call up and get approval to fire the 120s. And then also danger close, which is 600 meters or less, and then awaiting the clearance to fire that mission. So some reasons the mission may be called off due to field artillery intercepting the mission, air assets taken priority, or the line companies have decided to use company mortars. So again, going back to the computer records and some of the examples for each one. So if you look off to the left, you can see that it's a shift from known point. They're shifting from the registration point. Again, each box has its own signified thing that needs to be on that line. And then if you look on the computer record, on the far right, it says the initial fire command, This is the most important thing. It will get sent out to the gun line. So mortar to follow would be section. The shell and fuse be HE quick. Mortar to fire, number 2 gun. That just means that 2 gun will be the adjusting gun, and 2 gun will be the only one firing until the gun line receives the fire for effect. And then at that point, you have your deflection charge elevation. Again, that's going to be called off to the gun line. Once 2 gun fires that round, the FOs will observe the round, and then whatever the adjustments are, they'll call that back to FDC. Then FDC will put those adjustments in the computer and then call out the new gun commands to the gun line. In the middle here, we have the data sheets. So before going out to any training events or even in a deployed environment, this document pretty much just has the system locations, the altitudes for each one, the amount of rounds, the round types for the gun line, and then also if we do fire a target list worksheet number, it will then get input on this form. And then the last thing that we have is the target list worksheet. Usually before going out to the field or even before firing, FDC will receive the target list worksheet. It will have the target number, the target description, and then also the grid to that target. So now we're going to go into the examples of the plotting board. Again, the FDC chief will superimpose the gun location on the plotting board along with any of the priority targets. And then looking off to the right here, we have our safety T diagram. Just note that there's many different safety T diagrams that can be used. So this is just pretty much issued out to the squad leaders, telling them if FDC for whatever reason has any hiccups or errors, that the gun line can then notify that and tell FDC what the problem is. So at the elevation, it'll be given the min and max to what you can fire, and then also the min and max charges that you can fire for each round and round type. So at this point, we have a video of what FDC is doing right now. So FDC is getting a fire mission from fires. He is computing the mission. So everything that he's getting from fires, he's inputting and also relaying to the FDC check. As you can see in the video, the FDC chief has his clipboard with the computer records. So as he's doing the mission, he's going to copy it on to that computer record. And then also he has the plotting board underneath, so we can go ahead and plot the target location, and then also any follow-on missions. You can go ahead and copy that as well. So now we have an example of how pretty much the overview of FDC. So it'll start off, we have numbers in order, so 1 through 6. So it will usually start off with the FSO, so pretty much with the FSO, they will observe the target, so they'll get the grid to the target itself, and then that could either be the FO, the scout, and then at that point they're going to call over FM to fire cell. They'll tell fire cell exactly what the grid is and what they want for the method of engagement. Fire cell will then compute that and issue it to the FDC. FDC will compute the mission, input it into the computer, issued out to the gun line, either utilizing FM or voice. Once the gun line receives that, they will then fire the mission. And then as you see for number 6, we have ISR to notify us of the BDA from the mission. So again, the battle damage assessment. So review back through the video and discuss the lesson with your squad leader. And if you have questions, consult FTC personnel. Next class will be mortars and operations, the defense, engagement area development.